Welcome to this week's edition of the Webster Tarpley program. The Webster Tarpley program coming to you on Unbound Radio. It is the afternoon of Tuesday, the 16th of July. And we're going to give you a worldwide political intelligence briefing. The 16th of July, it's just about midsummer. As a matter of fact, it's the All-Star game this afternoon, this evening actually, at Willets Point in New York City. So it's the middle of the summer. So from this vantage point, we're going to offer an overview of what's actually going on in the real world. We serve the reality-based community. We are not based on taking counsel of your fears or manipulations or other extraneous factors. But we're trying to give an accurate picture of what's actually happening in the world and constantly direct you towards the points of intervention that will be most effective in the actual struggle to save civilization, because this is the issue. And smaller, more limited parts of this picture will not be effective. You got to proceed based on the big intelligence picture, and you've got to pick the point of maximum effectiveness. Let's say first of all that we need to look at the Middle East, and I would say above all the situation in Syria. We should take a quick look at Egypt in the process, but specifically Syria. The current situation in Syria allows us to entertain a certain cautious optimism, even though we must remain aware of the terrible dangers and the terrible losses that lie ahead. If you picked up the Washington Post on Saturday morning, as many influentials and policymakers do here, what you find on the Saturday morning Washington Post: rebel leader is killed in Syria. And this is a certain Hammam. Hammam was a moderate terrorist, a moderate cannibal. He was a close associate of General Salim Idris, the golden boy of the CIA. This character Hammam is probably himself was probably in the CIA orbit. But now he has been sent to his eternal reward. He was personally assassinated by one of the emirs of the Islamic Emirate of Iraq and the Levant. Because these people don't think that Syria exists, right? They say Syria is a creation of the imperialists. Well, you could say the same thing, I guess, about Iraq. Anyway, this leads us nowhere. The main thing is that one of the top leaders of the Free Syrian Army, always in quotes, working closely with General Salim Idris, the big guy that the U.S. has been trying to puff as the bringer of salvation to somehow save this lunatic adventure of overthrowing the Syrian government. This guy's assassinated, and what it leads to now is a phase of what I call death squad fratricide. Death squad fratricide is that every death squad is now fighting on two fronts. On the one front, they're fighting against the Syrian army and Hezbollah. On the other front, they're fighting against their fellow jihadis. And that, I think, is grounds for cautious optimism. Back in a minute on the Webster Tarpley program on Unbound Radio. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. So, the quick overview on the situation in Syria. This is the starting point of an outlook of cautious optimism on the world situation, is that the death squads are losing. Not only are the death squads losing, but in the course of their rout, as they are being routed from Qusair to Homs and then on to Aleppo, they're killing each other. They're fighting among themselves. The assassination of top Free Syrian Army leader Hammam last week at the hands of an emir, the coastal emir of the Islamic Emirate of the Levant and Iraq, or Iraq and Levant. Levant being, of course, the Eastern Mediterranean. The killing then is among themselves, so they're all fighting on two fronts. Now, this means that it's quite likely that the military situation of the death squads in general will become desperate. It's quite possible that they will be decimated. I don't think they're going to be wiped out completely, but they can be driven off any field very soon, and they will be limited to a kind of endemic terrorism of low to medium scale. So this is one thing. The obvious thing then is that the situation of the rebels is so wretched that the Israelis are intervening, and according to Russia, the Israeli intervention was accomplished with the complicity of Turkey. Oh, what a shame for Erdogan. How humiliating for the great neo-Ottoman, right? The great savior of the Turkish Empire that is to be, the one that replaced that of the Ottoman Turks under Erdogan and his Svengali there, Davutoglu. They are reduced to the wretched status of running dogs for the Israelis. The idea being that there were some Russian Yakonsk missiles that were being somehow transported in the coastal Syrian city of Latakia, not that far from Turkey, and somehow the Israelis were able to use Turkish territory, maybe even a Turkish airfield, to come in with Israeli jet fighters with standoff missiles and attack this shipment of Yakonsk missiles, cruise missiles that are used for anti-ship, anti-aircraft carrier purposes in particular. Notice, though, how dangerous this is. Israel and Turkey, a NATO state, get together and attack Russian values, Russian assets. And that, were there Russian technicians that were killed? What is the status of this? At what point might there be some kind of a shot across the bows of these people, right? The line coming from Russia today, which of course is correct, is that the Israelis believe that they're above the law, that international law doesn't apply to them, that they have the prima facie right to attack anybody, anytime, with no consequences, nothing in the Security Council. This incident revealed, apparently by U.S. Intelligence sources in a rather sketchy way. So that puts Erdogan in a much worse position even than he was. And of course, Erdogan is the chump. He's the sucker. He's the dupe of this situation, because he listened to Obama when Obama told him, Recep, come on in. Assad will be gone in 2 weeks. He believed it. He committed. And now he's paying a terrible price. Turkey's paying a terrible price as death squad fanatics run all over southern Turkey and ruin the tourist trade by their very bearded, odious presence in the Mediterranean ports, right? Iskenderun and places like this. Now, the Russians haven't done too much about this, but what they have done is put out an official Russian report that is the rebels. This is now an official Russian Foreign Ministry report. It is the rebels who use poison gas. Don't I hear about Assad? This is proven. The rebels use poison gas. This is then coming from Russia. It is supplemented by further information coming from Syria, say through the Syrian ambassador to the United Nations, Jafari, a man I think of great dignity, who comes forward and says the Syrian government has found about 150 barrels of highly toxic precursor chemicals that can be used to make poison gas. And now even on the Syrian government television, we find rebel laboratories that are in the process of producing poison gas shells, which the rebels want to use. So when they say they want sophisticated modern weapons, it's obviously not that they're going to wait for them. They're going to go ahead and build them themselves. So these rebels killing each other with emirs running around and other lunatics in the modern world. They're producing chemical weapons banned under treaties, right? Of course, they'll say they never signed the treaties. I guess not. The precursor chemicals, some of them come from Saudi Arabia. That ought to be followed up. All of this has now got to be used, and here is where we appeal to the citizens, right, to anybody, citizen or not, doesn't matter. Get the pressure on the U.S. Congress. They must continue to stall and block the money that Obama is, he's at least making the pro forma demand that this be provided. Not one penny, not one bullet, not 1 ounce of material, military supplies for these killers, because this is Al-Qaeda. That's who it is. 57 varieties of Al-Qaeda, but that's who it is. So the current logjam in the Congress was obvious enough for this to also get on the front page, believe it or not, of the Washington Post. And this was last Thursday. Divisions on Hill stall Syria plan. Differences over arming the rebels. Top-level officials lobby for the agreement. So that top-level officials means Biden. It means our friend Skull and Bones Kerry, the warmonger, the attempted coup artist who tried to seize control of the U.S. government on June 12th and start the bombing immediately. This Skull and Bones criminal, he's lobbying the Congress. He should be preparing his defense. He should have been impeached already. He should be on his way to trial in the Senate based on what he did. But, of course, we have to be great realists, and we know that the Congress works slowly, but we're not giving up on that. We want Skull and Bones Kerry impeached for an attempted coup leading to war in the Kissinger and Al Gore traditions. So, anyway, the Congress is deaf to these heartrending cries. Notice that the UN hypocrites now get into the action, right? We have the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and others. They say, oh, gosh, we've seen now that it's 5,000 casualties per month. If you're serious about that, UN, you should have called for all foreign troops, all Pakistanis, all Afghans, Chechens, Somalis, Libyans, Saudis, Moroccans, French, and British. They should all have been out sometime in 2011, 2012. Now it's not so simple, because since those foreign killers have come in illegally, it is, of course, the sovereign right of the Syrian government to appeal to Hezbollah on the one hand and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard on the other. And that is simply a sovereign right of a UN member state. But if you want to put an end to this, you should say the people who are illegally present in Syria should go home. This is the same situation we had at the end of the Tamil Tigers, when the British and the French saw that one of their terror pawns was about to be taken off the board with the crushing of the Tamil Tigers. They ran in Miliband and Kushner and started screaming about a humanitarian emergency. And we're told this one is now the worst since Rwanda. Well, tell Saudis, Emirates, Qatar, NATO, Turkey, Jordan to stop furnishing weapons, to stop becoming the royal road for jihadis going in there. There's also now the political side, which we maybe know less about, but which is going to be, I think, among the decisive factors. In Aleppo, in the past week or 10 days, we've had a food riot against the death squads, against the killers, against the jihadis. And it's that the part of the jihadi strategy is to prevent food from getting into the city, and that allows them to then claim humanitarian emergency and demand that the UN cut a swath through the Syrian army, calling that a humanitarian corridor, and come in and essentially resupply the rebels, because we know these UN vehicles that are supposedly carrying humanitarian supplies are often found to be full of weapons for the terrorists that the U.S., the British, and the French want to support. So the political defeat of the death squads, I think, is becoming more and more evident. In other words, the misrule, the absolute horror of being put under the dictatorship, the reign of terror of these bearded lunatics, and their version of Sharia, right, which is get out the scimitar and start lopping off hands and feet and heads and stoning women and God knows what else. A young boy executed for a harmless little joke in a bar and so forth, right? All of this continuing to happen. One of the commentators on one of the international cable shows today talked about the Anbar Awakening. Now, the Anbar Awakening is in some ways not comparable, but the idea being that normal people get so fed up with the presence of terrorists trying to dictate to them, right, trying to impose terrorist rule on them, that they get together, they organize themselves, they arm themselves, and they eject the terrorists. They kick them out. And I think that is one of the reasons that the Syrian rebellion is not going to be tenable. In other words, as they lose Homs, are driven back on Aleppo, and are demonstrably losing Aleppo, at that point we might well have some kind of a general uprising in northern Syria of people who have just, after 2 years of this kind of oppression, this lunatic yoke by these foreign fanatics, because a lot of them are foreign, the majority, I would say, that they're going to take up organization and arms and oust them. So what this points to then is, if we can keep the U.S. out in terms of the big battalions, right? We're talking now about the 1,000-bomber raid. We're talking about the 5 divisions on the ground, the tank division, the bombing campaign that goes on for 2 or 3 months. If we can stop that, it is very likely that this rebellion will be defeated, crushed, will subside, and that as it goes down, the fall will be accelerated by the fact that the terrorists have worn out their welcome, most emphatically. They have absolutely alienated and antagonized these populations in northern Syria that were, maybe thought that these characters represented democracy when they got there. But the point is, they didn't. So right now, we have to focus on the fact that Obama continues to say no to the big war. This is the main political fact. If you can't understand that Obama is saying no to the big war, you're a fool. You should drop out of politics. You should take up stamp collecting or coin collecting or maybe snowboarding. But we're getting to the point where it will not matter what Obama thinks, where the process of the collapse of the rebellion will become irreversible, and we're hoping for that before the end of the year. Back in a minute on the Webster Tarpley program. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program. It's the afternoon of July 16th, 2013, midsummer here in Washington, D.C. Congress still in session, though. Lots of things going on. Just a look for a minute at Egypt. And we are obviously giving great importance to the fact that the immediate trigger for the counter coup that overthrew Morsi and his gang, the so-called Muslim Brotherhood, this soi-disant, the self-styled, the people who call themselves the Muslim Brotherhood, right? They're about as Muslim as the German Christian Democratic Union of Angela Merkel is Christian. No, there's not much in common. This is certainly not a religious organization. It is a power cabal. Its goal is power and then the economic exploitation of power. The Muslim Brotherhood is the rich businessmen, editors, lawyers, doctors, but above all, some professors too. Rich businessmen dominate this, and we're supposed to believe that this group, which is, if not the 1%, it's the 2% or the 3%, whatever it is, with their 100,000 cadre, that is going to bring on a golden age for the downtrodden workers and peasants of Egypt. This is ridiculous. This is simply, and it is a foreign body, founded by British intelligence and locked in a worldwide alliance with the CIA, always subservient to the International Monetary Fund, and, despite its rhetoric, eager to make concessions to the Israelis, eager to give the Israelis unilateral concessions in exchange for nothing, as we saw concerning the Israeli-Egyptian treaty, right? The Egyptians could have said, look, we want to reopen this treaty, we want concessions for the Palestinians, we want you to finally create the two-state solution or something like that. Nothing of the sort, nothing of the kind occurred with this Morsi. So he was ousted because he, starting in public on June 15th, was preparing to use the 500,000-strong Egyptian military to attack Syria in the service of imperialism. So he was asking for it, and he got it. Now, the problem is that the immediate cast of characters that have come in are not as bad as Morsi, in the sense that Morsi was determined to sell out to the International Monetary Fund and wage war against Syria. The group you have now says, sell out to the International Monetary Fund, but don't, for the moment at least, wage war on Syria. And that is this El Baradei. I'm sorry, El Baradei is an agent of the International Monetary Fund, and this Prime Minister, this Bebli, he's also an IMF technocrat. And I have to say to these poor kids in Tahrir Square, technocratic governments are run by the IMF. Let's take a look at the recent experience in Greece, in Italy especially, the Monti government of technocrats, right, non-party people. These characters were emphatically the austerity ghouls of this situation. So what we're going to have now is a situation somewhat like the French Revolution, right? And since we just had July 14th, maybe we think about this in a minute, a couple of minutes here at the end of this segment and the beginning of the next. Right now, you'd say, well, we've gone from an IMF agent and warmonger to people who are simply IMF agents, and they're slightly less oppressive on the internal front. But now we have this process of radicalization, right? And we're always looking for the second revolution, right? In Russia, there was a February revolution in 1917, and then there was an October revolution. But it doesn't have to go quite so quickly. In the French Revolution, you have the events of the summer of 1789, right? The tennis court oath and the Bastille, right? These are mixed bags in both cases. But then you're going to have the second revolution in 1792, 1793, when the monarchy is liquidated and some really radical measures come into play. And this can be the case for Egypt, too. There's going to be a turnover in the ruling group. A few more things about this in a second on the Webster Tarpley program, Unbound Radio. And here we are again with the next segment of the Webster Tarpley program. Look, when you look at Egypt, don't despair. Don't think that just because the fall of Morsi has led to people that are, in the case of Baradei and this Bebli, or whatever his name is, Bebli, they're even more associated with the IMF, although the military option seems to have been foreclosed. This is now a process of radicalization. And you remember in the French Revolution, it goes on for quite a while, right? It goes on from 1789 really well into the following decade, right? When you get finally Napoleon taking over and institutionalizing these things. In particular, the leaders change, right? When the French National Assembly is formed with this tennis court oath in June of 1789, the leaders, I mean, the main inspiration is somebody like Abbé Sieyès, who writes, What is the Third Estate? But within a couple of years, it's the Jacobins, right, the more radicals who come in, but they're also highly factionalized. So you get the faction, first of all, of the Girondists, right, the Girondins. These people remind me of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Girondists are the rich provincial merchants, lawyers, producers of various kinds, just like the Muslim Brotherhood. And the dominance of the Girondists goes really from 1791, 92, until they're rounded up, and many of them executed in 1793. And they are their faction is broken because they call on foreign powers to intervene. And it's a little bit like the Muslim Brotherhood, right? The rich guys take over, the rich guys hijack the revolution, so to speak, and then their cardinal mistake is to deal with foreigners in matters of war. In the case of France, it was to invite people in, and in this case, it was to offer the Egyptian army. Then there's an interlude where you might say Danton is the big guy. This is a different faction. He's not a Girondist. He's a Cordelier, but he is swept aside. And then eventually we get Robespierre and Saint-Just, right, the most extreme. And not altogether negative, although this is a mixed bag in the extreme, right, between popular economic measures and the obvious excesses of the terror and the Committee of Public Safety at the end. But I think you just have to figure that there's going to be this process of radicalization in which various personality groups will be swept aside. Generally, in each case, the more moderate group is going to be swept aside by a more radical group until you reach some kind of a resolution. And the big question is always, what's the program? Does somebody know what to do? Give you just one more example before we come back to the U.S. Today we had the fourth Portuguese general strike of the year. 4 general strikes. Have they brought down the government? No. Have they broken the power of the IMF over Portugal? No. And I saw today why. On one of the international cable stations, we had a woman who was the spokesperson for the Portuguese Labor Confederation in their general strike. And you expect to hear the crisp marching orders, the points, right? 1, Wall Street sales tax. 2, nationalize the central bank. 3, act together with other countries to grab a piece of the European Central Bank, right? Fight the Merkel-Draghi axis. Because none of it, because she's an official of the Second International. She's from the Socialist International, and she's not going to do any of those things because that would violate Europe. So what it shows is you can have 4 general strikes in 6 months and still get nowhere if you don't have a program and if you don't have some leadership who are not completely sold out from the very beginning. All right, now let's focus on that. The leading fact here in the U.S. is that we are now in what is called an off-year election. Yes. The Congress is not up this year. The president is not up this year. And normally people will say, well, this is a year in which New Jersey and Virginia get the attention. And in New Jersey, we have the Garden State Göring strong now, stronger than ever because the Democratic Party has decided to support him, in effect, and abandon the Democrats of New Jersey with the traditional treachery of the Democratic Party. And then we have Virginia, which I think is looking more and more like a Democratic pickup because Bob McDonnell, the extremist governor of Virginia, is now also found to be a monster of corruption, right? He was stealing food and furniture. In other words, he was simply looting the executive mansion and otherwise, looting everything he got his hands on. This comes in the course of a trial of a chef of the executive mansion in Richmond, where this guy is accused of stealing food, and he said, no, I wasn't stealing. The governor told me to take this food as compensation because I was catering his daughter's wedding and other events for free. And we have things like the First Lady of Virginia telling a rich contributor, my husband needs a Rolex watch. See to it. All right, so and then we have Cuccinelli, right, the crackpot Tea Party fascisto candidate of the Republicans, right? He's running for governor now. This is one of the social conservative extremists who is not going to get many votes in Northern Virginia, and is not getting money either, because some of the big money people who went for McDonnell are not going for Cuccinelli. But I want you to turn away from both of those, right? Christie is a likely winner in New Jersey, perhaps, unless Willie Araujo upsets his apple cart, which is what we're working for. And then in Virginia, it's this likely pickup by Terry McAuliffe, right, from the Clinton money machine. But the big election this year is New York City, and it hasn't been for years because of Bloomberg, right? Because of Bloomberg dominating everything. The New York City election was ho-hum, but now it's open, right? You've got Anthony Weiner, you've got this woman Quinn from the Tammany machine, and in all likelihood, you're going to have Randy Credico, and Randy Credico can come in two ways, right? Credico, Credico, and I urge you to get in touch with him at Randy Credico 2013 or Credico 2013. Try those. You're going to get him. This is somebody who deserves broad support. We have in the past gone through his program. It includes things like, number one, the Wall Street sales tax, 0.5% by the city. That's absolutely appropriate. Stop foreclosures in the city, free medical care in the city, move towards making the transit system free, and then also restore the free tuition at College of City of New York, CCNY, to now CUNY, that we were able to maintain somehow all during the Great Depression of the 1930s, which we're told was worse than now. But somehow then you could have free tuition, but now you can't. Well, the reason you can't is because Wall Street pays nothing. They pay nothing to the state of New York. They pay nothing to the city of New York on their turnover. And as we've seen in the past, they pay almost nothing in federal corporate income tax. So Credico, we will know by the end of this week whether Credico has gotten onto the Democratic primary ballot. And this primary is held in September. We'll check the exact date for you in the coming weeks. But Credico, with that program, right, this is the best program that has emerged in an election race, certainly this year, and I think it also applies retroactively for recent years. This is the strongest program that we've seen. There are other things in there that we don't necessarily support as enthusiastically as some of them, but there is there's a series of program points there that will actually create an economic recovery in the city of New York and environs, and that is the measure, right? Will it work in objective reality? And it will. So he was supposed to find out yesterday, Monday, whether he would be challenged by the Democratic state Democrat or city hack machine, Tammany Hall, whether Tammany would challenge him, and then there are other possible formal hurdles with the Board of Elections and others. So by the end of the week, we will know whether Credico is on the ballot or not. Now, it's obviously much better if he is, because that puts him in the middle of the Democratic mayoral debates. And you'll remember that guy the previous time around, right, 4 years ago, who said the rent is too damn high and became world famous for 15 minutes. With Credico, it's the program point of tax Wall Street. Tax Wall Street is the nerve and fist of his campaign. And once you've taxed Wall Street, he'll tell you the benefits that will then accrue to the people to end this situation. What he always says, we just had July 14th, the Bastille. Okay, the problem of the old regime in France was that the nobility was not taxed. They paid nothing. The church was also not taxed. The church made a voluntary contribution, what they called a voluntary contribution, but this was far less than what a tax would have produced. So you can see the same situation, right? We don't have the French nobility, but we've got the finance oligarchs. We got people like Henry Kravis. You wanna ruin the day for the Koch brothers, for Charles Koch up there in his penthouse in New York City? Tax him. Hit him in the La Banza with a Wall Street sales tax. They'll scream bloody murder. They'll say they're going to go to the moon to avoid paying the tax, but they can't because the people they have to exploit and squeeze are all here, and they can't give up, right? They've got a death grip on this side, the monkey trap. They're not going to unleash or open their fist on this, right? They've grabbed it, and they're going to hang on to it. All right. So we'll know by the end of the week whether Credico will be on the Democratic primary ballot. And he's collected 4 or 5 times the necessary number of signatures. But as I know from sad personal experience, 1986, New York State is hyper-technical, and they try to throw you off the ballot any way they can. So anyway, one way or the other, we'll know that. Then, however, this process morphs into something of I think even greater importance, which is the tax Wall Street party. And that is not designed to be a New York party. That is a national and indeed international party, right? With certain changes, mutatis mutandis, we can apply this, we can make this tax the City of London party, right? Or the Bahnhofstrasse in Zurich or Frankfurt, right? Or tax the Monte dei Paschi di Siena, whatever it is. That will then be, in all probability, on the ballot coming in November. Now, this is not automatic, right? The process of gathering these signatures is time-consuming and back-breaking work. So I'm urging people, if you're in the New York area, you've got to get in touch with Randy Credico and volunteer for his Democratic primary campaign, which comes to a head in September, and parallel to and supplementing that, his role in the mayoral election as an independent party. In other words, a new party on the scene, the Tax Wall Street Party. Now, if you're far from New York, what can you do? You can ask yourself, what can you do to start the Tax Wall Street Party where you are? This is the idea whose time has come. Doesn't matter where you are. Check the laws of your state, locality. What does it take to get on the ballot as Tax Wall Street Party? Back in a minute. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. So, the Tax Wall Street Party is emerging in New York City, and it is, I think, fitting that an initiative of this type comes from, in some ways, from the belly of the beast, and on the other side, from a more advanced, certainly more cosmopolitan society than what we've had lately, right? The Southern strategy has given social and cultural domination to backward areas, quite frankly, those infected by racism and small-town oligarchy. Obviously, the oligarchy of Wall Street rules in a different way, but now here's the challenge emerging against the big issue, which is the financier oligarchy. Now, into what kind of a political situation does this new beginning come? We look at Politico of yesterday, Monday, July 15th, here on the front page. With lame duck Obama, 2016 started yesterday. Obama's a lame duck. He's lost a lot of traction, and he's weak. And this is actually made even clearer by the headline of The Hill yesterday, Monday, the 15th of July 2013. Weak versus weaker. We have a picture here of Obama and of Boehner, I guess we have to say. Obama's weak, Boehner is weaker. President Obama and Speaker Boehner are struggling to gain leverage in a number of upcoming fights over policy. The GOP is divided, and Boehner has faced rebellions, while the president has suffered a depletion of his political capital over recent months. Well, the president always has the upper hand if he wants to take it. Propose a jobs program. You could even get by with 5 million jobs. 10 million would be better. 30 million are needed, Obama. Propose some program and make the call to Bernanke. Pick up the phone and say, Ben, thank you for your commitment to buy $4 trillion of bonds from our states, our governors, our county executives, our mayors. Thank you for your willingness to have the Federal Reserve step up to the plate and contribute to a recovery, not just with hot money for hedge fund hyenas and zombie bankers, but with the rebuilding of our infrastructure. We want to go from a D to a C, and after that, we're going to have more tranches of 4 to 5 trillion until we get to an A, the only conceivable acceptable outcome for the United States, right? Passing everybody, making our current backwardness into the big advantage of having everything new, cutting edge, as modern as possible. That's what a president can do. Now, for this congeries, right, this gaggle in the House of Representatives, much harder. Now, just to keep up with them, the House Republicans have shown their genocidal intent. They passed a farm bill that excludes food stamps. They have nothing to say about food stamps. 50 million Americans survive thanks to food stamps. The House GOP stands accused of the Nuremberg crime of genocide against the American people as they propose to deprive 50 million Americans of their means of nourishment, survival from day to day. This continues the despicable tradition of Ron Paul in his Restore America program. You'll remember it's on the internet, and if you can't find it, I'll help you. He wanted to cut 63% from the food stamp budget. It's all spelled out in that program. It was issued in October 2011. He wanted to take the average meal per person allowance of SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, from $1.50 to 50 cents in the name of the Austrian school. Well, we say one Austrian was enough. That was Hitler, and we don't need any more Austrians. And thanks to these Republicans also, the student loans are still at 6.8%. So we continue, actually we're gearing up now for the autumn, our campaign to have the Warren-Tierney bill pass, 0.75% student loans paid for by the Federal Reserve. Now, in addition to weak Obama, weak Boehner, in the minute we have left, the weakness of Mitch McConnell, Dirty Harry, Dingy Harry, whatever you call him, went to the brink. He showed his nuclear option, and McConnell is back down. There are a couple of changes made in the personnel, but the fanatic Republicans have been forced to eat these nominations, right? Cordry at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and there will be a functioning National Labor Relations Board, which is what these union busters and wage gougers wanted to avoid. So I think it signals massive weakness by McConnell. And this was something he didn't want to do because he's afraid of some kind of a fanatic challenge there in Kentucky, of all places. Now, we're interested in warding off the permanent austerity dictatorship. It means that there must never be another Republican president, and there must never be Republican control of the three branches. That leads to a dictatorship worse than Morsi. We'll be back next week on the Webster Tarpley program.